Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about managers. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, do product owners and product managers add value to a software team? In my experience, they do not add too much to a software team. What is your take? I would say that it depends on the person here. So if you're talking about like a purebred manager who has no domain knowledge or anything like that, like what I like to say is that a junior product manager is the most meaningless person that you can have in a team, with one exception, and that is if you have a software team of completely socially inept people. And I hate to say that this is my truth, my findings, but they are there. They are there. I have been like for a very long time. I couldn't really figure out because when in the beginning of my career, I had the good fortune of being in teams where we had very socially capable software developers and like tech leads and things like that. But I've also, after a few years of working, seen teams where I kind of go, you're gonna have to get yourself an agile coach or like a manager or something here, because these people are, I mean, it's a struggle for them to define a story. They can't, like, I see it more and more. Like it's hilarious to me where we're literally sitting down and they can't really figure out how to do anything. Nobody takes any responsibility. Nobody feels any need to check with stakeholders or figure out, is this the thing we're supposed to be doing? Yes, no. Write down cards, and then I ask them, what does this mean? And they don't know. Like, it's really weird to me, but it does happen. And that's where you might find use for a manager. But the problem, as I said, with managers is if they are a pure type, where maybe they are not so good at this either, then it's basically just an individual who has to do the thing that I argue that quite a lot of people do at the higher levels of our society, where it's not important that this is a competent person for reasons. I don't agree with this, but it's empirically true. It's important that that person exists. That's the thing that happens. So in my teams, for example, if we don't talk about just managers, we talk about tech leads, for example, I can be in a team and my only job in that team is literally when they have a question or they have a dispute about how to do A or B and so forth in the code, I have an opinion. That's my entire job. Well, most of what I do in that team. I can literally just sit, in theory, if I didn't care so much about being able to give quality advice or quality suggestions about different things, then I don't really need to know the code either, because they will sit and do the thing that, as you can imagine, quite a lot of politicians, like that's what they have, where you have people who work for you, who put together a PowerPoint presentation for you and explain the problem to you, and then you pick, because that's how hierarchy works. You don't necessarily have to be the most competent person to have an opinion. It's just that someone has to have an opinion so that the developers who are in a stalemate can move on. And that, I argue, is what most managers unfortunately boil down to. That's what they do. So they will talk to stakeholders, they will do all these things that I argue are fairly obvious to a socially capable person. But sadly, as I said, it's a necessary role. And I'm not saying that you have to have a dedicated person to do that, but someone has to be able to do it. Because all those stored cards and like so forth and so forth, guys, they're not just going to come in if nobody does it. And it's actually one of the things that, well, I suspect that this was when I started figuring out that this was part of what makes a successful software project, and I started taking more and more responsibility for knowing how to do that really, really well. That's when I became more and more eligible for higher roles within software development. Because as I said on a few occasions, guys, like there comes a point when hopefully you will realize that you can't code away every problem. It doesn't matter how good your like coding skills are if the requirements on you are unsustainable, or if you don't really know what to do. Like a classic one is, as I've said before, guys, like the software developers the software developers will claim that it's the fault of the product managers that they give like difficult to understand specifications, or they change their minds, or this, that, and so forth. And the managers say, the developers are making buggy systems and shit like that. And I kind of go, well, yeah, these are truths, but the way you solve it is that, well, it's kind of hard. This is what I argue at the very least. This is why I did what I did. It's very hard for a product manager to figure out if they have given the developers all the information that they need for the technical part, because they have no knowledge of coding, which I know, but that's how it works. And so to me, when it's a little bit, my analogy is like, it's a little bit like if a doctor accuses the patient of describing their symptoms poorly, and then they give them the wrong medicine. That I find a little bit, that to me, that is what it is when I hear software developers complain about, we didn't have a requirement for that, or like they make these weird excuses all the time for things when they feel like they've done a bad job. And I kind of go, yeah, I'm sorry that you feel that way, but the reality is that if you're doing this right, at least in my opinion, then you should have a pretty clear understanding of what you need to know in order to deliver something before you sit down and start working. And for some reason, that is not obvious to every software developer. I see tons, and I almost go as far as to say that it's a norm to see software teams write a story card that if I ask them a week from when they wrote it, what are you supposed to be doing? And they can't answer. That's normal. It's completely normal for, not in my teams usually, but it is normal. I see it all the time, unless, as I said, I make an effort to not make that happen. That's why I try to do this thing. As I said, I try to understand, how do I actually get a good, clear specification? How do I ask the right questions? How do I make sure that I'm making the right things? And so what I do is that I, in turn, can evaluate now if my product manager is bringing any value. Because the thing that determines if the product manager has any value when I do this is, can you answer those questions? If they don't have any answers, they don't really know the domain or anything like that, then they're completely pointless, because then I have to go and figure it out myself. Like, I have to do their job again. I have to do their job as well to go and figure this out. But if I know how to ask the right questions that I really need to know in order to build a good system, and they can answer those questions about the domain and the business needs and how this should work and the source and so forth, then I am driving the conversation, just as like a good doctor would do. You do some tests. You make sure that you figure out, because you can't hold the patient responsible for knowing how to give you all the information that you need. You have to know yourself how to extract that information in a decent way from your patient. I treat the product managers and my stakeholders exactly the same way. They can't be held responsible for knowing how to set up a work framework so that I get the answers that I need. That's what the agile coaches and so forth are forced to basically be part of. That's what they are supposed to be doing when you have what I argue, I call it process incompetent software developers, or socially inept software developers. That's how I look at them at the very least. So what I want you to take away from this is that I would say that yes, a product manager can be a completely insignificant individual in the team, depending on the one that you have. If it's just a person who facilitates meetings and so forth, at least in my teams, like, it basically is just someone I drag along. Like, they own the meetings, but they don't actually make much in terms of a difference. They do something that anybody can do. But that is also only true if you have socially competent and like well-rounded software developers, or tech leader, someone who like that, who really knows how to figure out all of these sorts of things. And as I said, guys, for me, that's obvious things. But I've also been in the industry for long enough now to say that I've been part of teams where the tech lead, he or she really needs a scrum master, an agile coach, or a product manager, or someone else to do all those things, because that person simply does not have the social skills necessary to lead a team efficiently and to make sure that the work gets done effectively. It's actually at the point now, guys, where in my stage of my career, due to the fact that I took the time to try to figure this out a little bit, so that, as I said, I'm going to be a good doctor or a good technical person, so that I actually know how to set everything up and how to ask the right questions and actually get the information I need, so that the system is not going to scale incorrectly in the wrong way or have a lot of bugs, like to create all of these issues. Because as I said, guys, if the specifications are in a certain state, you can write the best code in the world on day one, and on day two it's not going to work because all of a sudden something changed that is unforeseen to you. But if you knew how to figure out where things are heading and so forth, you could have accounted for that in your code. That's the trick, in my opinion. That's the magic sauce that you need in order to scale a system over time. You really have to be in tune with the requirements as they come along, and the people who are setting those requirements, and how to get the answers that you need, or ask the right questions. And that is the thing that determines for me if this manager is worth anything or not. If they don't have any answers or anything like that, then they're basically useless to the team. But at the same time, I can tell you that the amounts of times I have been asked, Fredrik, can you please go into the software team and help them figure stuff out, is, let's say, more than once. I'm starting to think that I'm going to build my whole career on that, due to the fact that it's so difficult to find a technical person who has a really, really high understanding of technical matters, but also has the soft skills part. That seems to be like a unicorn type of deal to find. Have a great day.